Welcome, welcome, welcome in everyone. Welcome to Care Concierge with Carepatrol, where education is the heart of everything that we do. Those of you who are new to us may not know who we are, what Carepatrol does. We're aging care navigators, which is a way we like to think of ourselves. Some of us are better known as senior placement or placement services. But what we do is meet people in crisis or in planning stages and let them know what options exist to meet their needs in the care spectrum. We work from Montgomery to Tennessee, and most of the time we work for free. We always work without charging our clients, and we're paid by providers. But 60% of the time we are not paid because we either help someone find hospice care or nursing home care or HUD housing or other things for which we legitimately can't be paid. So really, of the 4,000 or more people we've helped, we really don't always seek income. That's not why we do this. We do this because it's the right thing to do, really. And we count on you. That's why we do this education, not only because I personally enjoy it, but also because it hopefully will remind you when you have a friend or family member, patient or client who's in need of advice or guidance or pricing for the cost of care, you'll think of us. And that's what we hope. And so many of you do. And I just want to stop a moment and thank you for doing so. We truly appreciate you. Today, we're going to address ethics and cultural diversity. This is the second in our series. And as all of our, or most of our contact hours are suggested by you all in our evaluations, this was a comment from Ethics and Cultural Diversity 1, which we did, I believe, in April. One of our attendees said, I really hoped you'd get to conflict resolution. So I think that was a fair opinion. And so now we're going to do that today, conflict resolution in the workplace. This is an ethics unit. It's 1.0 contact hours for both nurses and for social workers. We're accredited by the Alabama Board of Nursing and also by the Alabama Board of Social Work to provide, credential, create, and offer you these contact hours. The survey won't work, Ms. Wright, until you have a password, I don't believe. But let's see. I won't give the password yet, but thank you for letting me know. We'll look into that later. And the password is the reason we have a password is that we want for this to be considered a live or face-to-face presentation for our social workers. And that is how the board explained to us that we could do so, was by having a password protected evaluation, which theoretically ensures that you're here for the entire time. We do encourage discussion, and I appreciate Ms. Wright for adding her comments and questions in the chat room. And I do really very much believe that we're all enhanced and enriched and furthered when you add your experience and knowledge to all of us. And so I like for others to hear a voice other than mine. I like for them to hear yours and have another perspective. And so I hope you'll be comfortable commenting in the chat room. And if you like, I can unmute you and you can speak with us directly. We'll be uploading the nurses' hours to the ABN website within a week or so. Social workers and everyone who completes an evaluation will get a certificate, again, for 1.0 hour. And this is an ethics hour, and this is a live hour. So we appreciate you being here today on a Friday. And Friday in healthcare, as and I know, is usually very chaotic. So thank you for setting aside time for yourselves and others to learn more about this. And I hope you do learn something. What we want you to learn, our objectives today, as we discuss ethics and cultural diversity 2, conflict resolution in the workplace. our objectives today are to, first of all, we're going to highlight some models of loneliness, if you can, and one of which is the dual concern model. And it lists various types of loneliness, and we want you to try and maybe remember some of those. We found a set of conflict resolution steps, and really these are 8 steps. They could be 5, they could be 12. They simply are the same among the steps. They all involve sort of the same approach, and they're all tested and proven. And then we want to talk with you about something that happened just recently. The U.S. Surgeon General set out an advisory on loneliness, and we're going to get into that and maybe some solutions that were proposed. And I'd love to get your thoughts on what solutions you might propose. So let's move forward today. Here's someone coming into the waiting room. We left off in April with cultural diversity and with this quote from Mahatma Gandhi. Now, those of you who are younger may not know who Mahatma Gandhi is. Mahatma Gandhi was Indian, from the continent of India, and he led his people out of British colonial rule and into being an independent democratic nation. And the way he went about this was a culture of and a message of nonviolence, nonviolent protest. And why is this maybe important to you in the United States? It's important because the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. patterned his approach to civil rights based on his admiration for and extensive readings of Mahatma Gandhi. Dr. King believed in nonviolent protest as practiced by and witnessed in Mahatma Gandhi. And so it's a very, I think, weighty quote from Mahatma Gandhi to say that our ability to reach unity in cultural diversity and conflict resolution will be the beauty and the test of our civilization. Our ability to reach unity and cultural diversity and conflict resolution will be the beauty and test of our civilization. So culture can be defined in numerous ways, and we actually approached that in April. And what we'd like to say, just as a macro definition, is that culture is a complex pattern of ideas, of emotions, and of symbolic manifestations that tend to be expected by, reinforced by, and rewarded by, and within a particular group. And so let me get the discussion started. I think there's no greater topic in the state of Alabama than this question, which any of you who've moved into the state of Alabama at any point in your lives were asked on the first day that you occupied and breathed the air here. Roll Tide or War Eagle. And Keldon Jones, you got the WDE. I mean, you are so funny. Every time you comment, you make me laugh. You're a joyful person. Thank you. Ms. Hale, Roll Tide, WDE, WDE. Got a lot of DEs. Wiggle, wiggle, baby. Thanks. Thank you, Ms. Jones. Roll Tide. Thank you. Oh, I like that elephant. So you can see that here among us, we're both and, aren't we? We are both in this culture, the culture of this class itself and those who attend it. You with the other attendees are in the culture of clinician, maybe social worker, maybe nurse, maybe some other field. And yet you're divided at the same time in the culture of something else, which is college football. And so you're a member of multiple cultures at one time, and some even compete within the cultures that you're in. Does that make sense? Or within yourself, even. And so I want to go back through what we sort of went through a little more exhaustively when we spoke last on this topic in April, cultural diversity. We've identified 24 types of culture. Now, what does that mean? Does that mean that life is limited to 24 types of culture? No. There are an infinite number of cultures. Anytime two of us get together and have a shared language or other shared lingo or expectations or symbolic manifestations that are rewarded and reinforced by one another, such as this Zoom class is itself a culture of type of sorts. Okay. We have expectations within this class. We have norms. We have symbolic manifestations. There are things we get from it and give to it. That's a culture. And we have many cultures. So it's the culture of norms. And the culture of norms is strong and it's within each of us. And as we discussed some time ago, that would be the fact that were you to go anywhere in the world, and I mean anywhere, and there was some sort of event or happening, and there was a door or a gate to it, someone would go stand there. And the next person who came up would not go and stand beside them, probably. Certainly wouldn't go and stand in front of them. No matter what culture they're in, even some indigenous cultures, they will stand in line. That is a norm. Standing in line seems to me to be the most omnipresent value that any of us exist. There are roles. You are clinicians. You work in a radiology clinic, or you work in a dialysis clinic, or you work in a prison. Those are roles. You are a mother, you are a daughter, you are a sister, you are a partner, you are a romantic partner, you are a churchgoer, you are a volleyball player. Well, these are all roles, and you wear them all at the same time, and we have expectations. So if I were to come to your workplace and I were new to your workplace, there's an expectation that you would greet me. The onus is on you to greet me as the junior person, and you being a senior and within that culture already. There has to be an extension. That's an expectation. Habits habits of culture might be something like your lunchtime plans. Do you get together with 2 or 3 people, go for a walk, or eat in a certain place? That's a habit, and that's a culture, because y'all do that every day or once a week or however often. There's the culture of language. That's not only our indigenous tongue, but it is also the language of our workplace, the lingo, if you will. There is the culture of food. I think very little else touches us in terms of understanding culture quite like food. It is sensory. And we know, and we have expectations that if you are from Thibodaux, Louisiana, you can make some pretty good gumbo. And we expect that. We know that. We identify that with you. There are events. In my former life, I was an event marketer. I worked at city stages, and I started a haunted house called Sloss Fright Furnace. And the thing that I remember about events is that people would look forward to these every year. And we had some folks who were always there with us every year. And you could tell that this was their culture. They looked forward to this. This brought them out and things like it. There are pastimes. This could be what you do when you're off work. Do you crochet? Do you knit? Do you paint? Do you work in the garden? There's a culture among those people. There's the culture of values. The easiest way, I think, to explain a value to you is, and particularly if you played any kind of organized sports, a value is sportsmanship. That's a value, and we all have it within us. We all know that we're not supposed to foul. Now, whether we do and how we react to that foul, that tells a lot about our character. So if we admit the foul, okay, we're still being sportsmanlike. If we deny or argue, that's unsportsmanlike, as was the foul itself. And that's a cut and dry thing. We can understand that. That's a value. It pops up. It comes out from within us. And it's when we're ourselves. There's the culture of fashion, and I'm not assuming that these young ladies are more the culture of religion and indigenous origin. The culture of fashion would be more like a punk rocker or a gothic kid. If you ever watch, what is it, South Park. There's the culture of economy. Now, that's two things. It's one, it's the fact that you all are working together. You're in an economic, you're both trying to make money. So that's the culture of economy. It's the friends and culture that you develop within that, but it is also the culture of people who create a life for themselves in a way. Maybe the best way to explain that might be the well-known Comic-Con, where people make costumes like their favorite character and then go to Comic-Con and convene with other people who've made costumes of the same character. That's a culture. There's the economy of lifestyle. Maybe the best way to recognize a lifestyle culture might be to think of it as maybe someone who is vegetarian or vegan that alters the changes in the way they approach their lives. There's the culture of knowledge. That would be the passing down of things such as your grandmother's biscuit recipe, or which crops to plant in which seasons and which years. There's the culture of creativity. Most of us limit, when we think about culture, ourselves to the notion that the creative arts are culture, and that is what culture is, and only that. It's not, it's a part. It's one part of many types of culture. It is the one that we most think of. There's the culture of stories. This is not necessarily literature or movies. This is more the stories we tell ourselves about ourselves, such as our family history or our fraternity or sorority history or the American Revolution. And like the American Revolution, these stories may not necessarily be the whole truth. There's the culture of symbols. The easiest way to think of this, I think, is the Nike swoosh. You know what that means. It means excellence, greatness, quality, all of those things, fashion. It hits all those things. The Nike swoosh, I think, is better known now than Coca-Cola, if that could be possible. But those are the symbols of modern times. There are rituals. Rituals are not necessarily religious in nature, so although you might think they would be, a ritual would be something like going every year for 12 years to the back to school orientation for your child. That's a ritual. You do the same thing. You have the same expectations. It satisfies a certain need or box check. That's a ritual. There's a rite of passage, which would more be something like a bar mitzvah or a bat mitzvah that someone of the Hebrew faith would undergo to show that they are now adults. There are holidays, of course, we know what that is, and epic meanings. September 11th is an epic meaning, and we all have a way that we approach that day. There's the culture of community, which we are, as this Zoom class is the culture of community. There's the culture of consumerism. And by this, we don't just mean people that spend all day on QVC. It's people who are trying to have a certain thing, maybe a collection, to identify with or identify themselves as. I think of Disney maybe as the most apparent of these. There's media and communication, which is obvious, and then there's shared experience, which you all have at work. So if you think about it, just as an aside here, I haven't asked this question formally in our presentation, but I'd like to know, of these 24 cultures, how many do you feel are at work within you at any given time? Is there only one? Are you a culture of one? Or do you see that all of these might come to the fore at different points and in different relationships and, different, circumstances? So that's the point I want to prove by going through this again a little too exhaustively. So if you have an idea, or if there's something you don't understand, let me know, but you don't have to answer in the chat room. I'm just curious, do you see that all of these, in fact, and even more might be present in you? And I'm going to want to ask you formally, does knowing these various types of cultures really help you identify when there may be a source of conflict? Does knowing that there are various types of cultures at work within not only you, but the person with whom you have a conflict, does it help you to identify the source of that if you sit back and think about what cultures might be at work in the person with whom you have conflict? Does that help? Excuse me 1 second, get something going. So conflict, according to the Cambridge Dictionary, is an active disagreement between people with opposing opinions or opposing principles. And of course, that definition leaves open the idea that disagreements may occur at any moment between anyone for quite really any reason. Now, conflict can be helpful when we do stand up for ourselves or for others. It helps us to evolve, to grow in confidence, to grow in our ability to stretch ourselves, to learn how to work together. But if we handle conflict poorly, we're going to see as a consequence anger, divisiveness, and even more problems. So there are, of course, personal differences such as values that we discussed and personalities, ethics, age, education, gender, background, on and on and on. And so any of these actually might be an object of conflict if we converge with someone within one of these arenas, like political beliefs, with whom we don't share the same values. It may occur if we don't share the same goals or way to reach a goal or process. It may be that we are, whether we know it, in competition. It may be that we are excluding others or we feel excluded by the opinion of the person with whom we have conflict, and it surely points overall to a lack of communication. So generally, though, workplace conflict falls into two categories. There's personality conflict, and these are disagreements between individuals, and these are generally emotionally driven disagreements. And then there's substantive conflict. This is tangible, this is real, it's task related. It may be something like a decision that your superior makes, it may be your colleague's performance, or it may be the direction that your department is heading now. And any of these, if unaddressed, can spiral. So the most common causes then of workplace conflict would be, first and foremost, unclear responsibilities. There may be some members who feel they do more than others. They may not feel that they've been rewarded with more responsibility or less. And it may then undermine the team by duplicating work or having work fall through the cracks. And then, as all of you know now, there is competition for resources in healthcare. So money, materials, equipment, and particularly people now are limited. And then there's different interests. So you may be focused on one particular goal, departmental goal, while your colleague may be focused on another, and those two may seem at least to be in opposition. And they're common at work, these interpersonal conflicts. In fact, there was a survey of 2,000 or so US workers in which 94%, so they had worked with a quote toxic person in the previous 5 years. And the top source of tension on the job has been reported as being the relationships, people. So, and people worry, they react in ways they later regret, which causes greater harm to the relationship. And some may even find that they withdraw from work entirely, something they once enjoyed. A New York Times survey, this is surprising, and I threw this in for y'all. A New York Times survey of 4,500 or so healthcare workers, doctors, nurses, others. 71% who were surveyed said that disruptive behavior or toxic workplace behavior, in other words, such as an abusive, relationship with maybe a physician, or condescending or insults from others on the team, even insulting you personally. They say 71% of these tie this behavior to medical errors. 71% of medical errors, in other words, in their mind, occur because of this. 27% tie these to deaths. And so you, particularly in the field you're in, need to be ever vigilant about conflict resolution inside your department, clinic, office, wherever, not to mention your personal life, of course, which goes without saying. I want to ask, though, and I don't want you to, and this may be a little much because you may feel like they may know, but if you're confident and comfortable that you can say so, would any of you, like these 94%, say that in the last 5 years, you have worked with a toxic person? And of course, don't name them, please, but just a simple yes or no would do. Have you worked with a so-called toxic person in the last 5 years? And you might, if you say yes, you might say, well, how do you deal? Do you avoid? Do you try and engage? How do you live with this relationship? And it seems that far too many of you, and I appreciate the answers, have said yes. And that is the worst. I had the privilege of not doing that, but I know it would be hard. Oh, Miss Phipps, you eventually changed jobs. My goodness. I'm so sorry, but I always think those sorts of things may be God's plan, and I'm sorry to be religious with y'all, but where we end up is, I think, where we're supposed to be. So conflict resolution is then the process of resolving this dispute that you have, and whether it's a co-worker, a manager, between a manager and a team member, or a service provider, or a vendor, or the workforce, or in the entire department. If you have a conflict, the best thing to do, the best course of action in this order is all around negotiation, communication. Resolve the problem quickly if you can by communication. Identify a solution if you can that both or all agree to, if you can, and improve that relationship through that act. But so Ms. Alexander said yes, she avoided contact or conversation about the previous question with toxic folks. Ms. Mahan said yes, she avoided it and accepted that it will pass, non-confrontational personality. And Ms. Smith said she confronted to resolve it face to face. And so you see, we have different approaches. Ms. Smith perhaps took the harder choice in the moment, but the easier choice in the long term, and the better choice for the group as a whole. So conflict resolution, and the proper way to do it, we have to do this to maintain workplace morale. And through conflict resolution, we hope that we then, through communication and negotiation, begin to understand more about the belief and value and cultures that another person is bringing to this conflict, to see if we might practice a little grace. Now, this is going to ensure that this relationship can survive and possibly thrive, and it will develop a skill in us that we can use to further advance ourselves personally and professionally. So there are many, many, many conflict resolution strategies and models. The ones that we'll address here are the conflict resolution curve, and it separates conflict styles. It separates conflict into conflict styles, and those are two separate styles. They compete. One is a competing entity, and the other, the accommodating entity. And you can see that we sort of find, as one competes and one retreats, that they eventually will meet somewhere. And we hope that that's the win-win. There's the relational dialectics theory, or RDT, which explores the way that we can use communication in terms of a targeted, specific, formulaic way to manage conflict and to manage contradiction among the players. This concept focuses on maintaining the relationship through coordinated talk or scheduled talk. And it assumes that if we can provide this, we can remove some of the opposing tendencies between us. And because these are constantly changing, that we must constantly practice this communication style. There's the strategy of conflict, which studies negotiation during conflict and the behavior that results from that negotiation that forms the conflict behavior. And this is based on game theory, which is basically a mathematical concept that predicts probabilities. In that theory, there is the idea that first you want to redirect the focus from the conflict to something else. Now, this is a very aggressive style. You want to gain advantage in this style. It is a belief that conflict is a contest and that behavior is a matter of rational judgment and perception. So let's go way back to the foul analogy around basketball and values. It's wrong to foul unless this person is going to make a basket that will put the other team ahead of you. Then you foul. So that's a value. And it's not if A, then B always. It's if A, then B, if C is also true. And that's sort of the same way that this game theory works, which is, we make our judgments based on what should be the rational optional response. And then we form various probabilities off of that and try and get to one and see how we can get to the one that's the most amenable, if that makes sense. But the one that we are going to look at just briefly is the dual concern model, because it assumes that people have a preference for dealing with conflict based on two underlying dimensions of their personality. One is their concern for self, which is their assertiveness, and one is their concern for others, which is their empathy. And the belief is that people come to a balance between assertiveness or self and empathy or others, and it satisfies, we hope, the needs of both. So the dual concern model, which is pictured here in the graphic for those of you who can see the screen, is comprised of these different types that all converge on the center, or the ideal concern. So the avoidance conflict style, which is what one or maybe more of you alluded to employing, is someone who either becomes joking about a subject or changes the subject or denies the problem exists, or will simply sort of wait and see if things get better. The accommodating conflict person would have a high level of concern for others and a low level of concern for self, and they would derive their satisfaction from meeting the needs of others. So they're, in other words, fairly predictable. They're going to go with what is in the interest of everyone over themselves. There's the competitive style, the opposite of this, in which someone's concern for self takes paramount, and they show little to no empathy. They seek to dominate the discussion. They see it as win or lose, and they will insult you personally. They will accuse you of things. They will try and intimidate you. We know these people. These are the people, I believe, that many of you alluded to earlier when you said you had worked with a so-called toxic person. The conciliation style is one in which the person has both concern for self and concern for others. And this style is one in which they value fairness and value and or anticipate a give and take that will eventually lead us to conflict resolution. And then there's the cooperative conflict style. This is the really ideal approach that each of us would want to strive to adopt, which is one in which we collaborate. So rather than seeking sides or a win or lose, we seek a middle ground. We try and ask what would be good for them and what would be good for us, and how do we make those things happen. This is both highly assertive and it's also highly empathetic. It is give and take in a real way. And it sees this as a creative opportunity. So if you can shift your thinking from conflict being a challenge to conflict being a creative opportunity, then you might be willing at that point to more willingly invest your time and resources and words to solving this dispute. And this is recommended. So to date, then, I wonder which of y'all, if you caught those styles in any sort of way, can you name what you think style you embrace? Are you, and let's go back to that slide so you can see them. So to date, would you say that you're have more practice avoidance, or have you been accommodating? Have you put yourself last? Have you been competitive? Have you won at all cost? Have you been conciliatory, which is a kind of give and take, very amiable, or you've been cooperative and really tried to not only solve the problem, but solve something greater, resolve something greater, add you into the equation? Ms. Wright, you're an accommodator. Thank you for saying so. And anyone else that cares to name that, although that is a little personal, I guess, I apologize if you feel it so. So the thing that we've got to remember, whatever style we are or have been or aspire to be, Miss Melton, you're more confrontational. Thank you for letting me know. Aren't most social workers accommodators until they can accommodate no more? That's worth discussion if anyone wants to unmute. Conciliation, Ms. Smith. So you are one among many. And so let's just take something that's kind of, every day. You may find that your colleague is late 5 minutes every day, and that this causes you great consternation. That this person is 5 minutes late every day to every meeting, and yet there is no consequence from the superior, from the management, or anyone else. And you, your whole life, have made it a practice to be not only on time, but early. So for you, it's not only that they're 5 minutes late, for you, they're 15 minutes after you arrived. And this is a source of conflict. Now, if you are practicing naive realism, which most of us do, you believe that you're seeing this objectively. This person is 5 minutes late. Being late is always wrong. Okay? There's an ethical thing I'm throwing in for you. And anyone who has another view is just simply uninformed, or they're biased, even worse. And so we recognize and resist. But if you challenge your perspective, challenge yourself to go beyond naive realism, you might ask yourself, well, how do I know that what I believe is true? How do I know that being late is always wrong? What if I'm wrong about that? How would I change my behavior if I didn't think that it was always wrong to be late? Would I get more accomplished, possibly even sometimes? What assumptions have I made? Is this something I carry from early in life, from childhood, where I've been told this, and I've carried it through life, and I've never questioned it? Or how would someone with different values see these things? And so let's assume then that the person with different values is the person who's late. And the person who's late stays an hour late every day, although the person who's upset, you, leave pretty much at 5. Now, they may say, I can be late because I give other time. And they may be justified. And so you might see that where you saw a conflict, maybe one doesn't truly exist. They're giving of themselves in the way that they can. You're giving of yourself in the way that you can. You don't need consensus on the facts of what's happened. or who's to blame. You need to focus your focus on what should happen next. Ms. Helms, you're definitely an accommodator. Mr. Alexander resolves the issue with everyone present. Ms. Phipps agrees with you, Ms. Dean. And Ms. Jones says it depends on the situation. Thank y'all for engaging me and one another today. That is really what conflict resolution and communication is about. So we talked about the one bias, which is naive realism, but there are some other biases that may be affecting us too. So as we run down these questions of ourselves so that we can understand our part in the conflict, let's ask ourselves, are we guilty of fundamental attribution error? In other words, do we assume that the person who's 5 minutes late is lazy and not that they are someone who is anything but lazy? They work an hour late every day. And then believing the opposite of us. We're not lazy, we're on time, even though we leave at 5. Confirmation bias might be interpreting the events or the evidence as proving what you already believe. I believe they're lazy. They're 5 minutes late. That confirms what I believe. They are lazy. And it'd be difficult for them to prove otherwise to you because you leave at 5, although they stay till 6, which you were unaware of. There's affinity bias, which is unconscious, where we align with people who are similar to us. So it may be that the person who is late to every meeting is of a different race or faith or other value or cultural background than you, and therefore you are less likely to make allowance. And if you want to know about yourself, if this is true, do what I did. Google Project Implicit. This is a nonprofit, really, I guess, data collecting research program by Harvard, the University of Washington, and the University of Virginia. And when you go to Project Implicit, you can click on a whole bunch of topics to determine your bias. And that could be on anything from weight to race to religion to, I mean, a lot of topics. I did some and I was surprised to see my bias. I did not think I had such bias. And it was sobering, and it may be for you. And then you want to play devil's advocate with yourself. And I would suggest this is generally a good plan when making decisions. Flip it and test it. If this person were the same as you, would you make the same assumptions? And would you say the same things? Would you treat them the same way? Would you behave the same way? So if your colleague was a different gender or race, how would that be different? And then ask someone you trust. Ask your life partner, your spouse, or your romantic partner, your children. Tell them briefly your situation and say, here's my position. Am I right or am I wrong? Get a second opinion. Okay, computer. So who then, I want to know, and you don't have to name a name, you can name their role in your life, but who do you find that you trust the most in your life about your workplace? And you don't have to answer that necessarily for us, although I'm curious, but answer that for yourselves. Who do you find that you trust the most about your work life? A BFF who does not work. That's good. And I'm glad you've got somebody. And I hope we all have somebody. You know, on Monday, I believe it's Monday, we're doing the loneliness epidemic. I hope you'll join us. It's a new thing. And then I believe that it may help some of you who are feeling lonely, if you are. I'm glad Ms. Dean isn't. So conflict resolution is to, first of all, we want to know our goal in these conflicts. We want to stay focused. We want to be clear about our goals. And what are our goals? Well, simple. We're going to list them. We're going to list our big goals and our small goals and circle the ones that we find most important. And then that will determine our actions. Now, we want to set goals low. So if we want to say, with the case of the person who's late, I want to try and just be accepting the next time they are late. I want to try and be calm, and even maybe something like, think of a nice thing about them, okay? Don't set your goal as have a exceptional relationship with this person. That's too much. Start in small steps, baby steps. Set your goals low. And then once you've decided what those goals are, write them down. You know, and many, many studies have shown this, that if you write down your goals, and particularly daily, you have an almost 1.5 times likelihood of achieving those goals. Oh, I'm sorry, I've gotten backwards, y'all. I'm all messed up. Let's see, here we are. Refer to these goals each time you think you're going to interact with your colleague. Now, it's natural to turn to others when something is off at work while you're at work. It's natural to want to confirm an email that may seem vague or unclear, or to get advice about how to approach this patient or situation, or to just be reassured that you did do the right thing. Now, this is venting, and it's also gossiping. And research shows that gossip can be important in a both positive way, in such bonding, and in a negative way. Now, in the positive way, this bonding releases adrenaline and dopamine, so we want more of it. And then it can behave or prevent us from behaving selfishly. So if we know that our friend gets very upset when someone else is 5 minutes late to a meeting, we naturally then would probably want to be on time, just in honor of them. And it's perfectly legitimate to gossip at work if you're helping to sort out your feelings or make sure that you're right about doing something. Just be very careful. You might choose your BFF, but if you're venting or gossiping at work, try not to say anything about anyone above you unless you bring it to them directly. Don't gossip about people above you. And you know, the other thing is, don't gossip to someone that you don't know that you can trust. So, and then lastly, don't gossip with people who you know are going to join in and say, yeah, they're really terrible. No, you want someone that's going to say, you know, yes, she does 5 minutes late to every meeting, and I find it frustrating too. But did you know she stays every day till 6? And so let them challenge your perspective. They may even disagree with you, and you may find that you, in fact, were wrong in that particular instance. Now, has gossip ever served any of you well? I wonder. Have you found that gossiping or venting has served you well? It can, you know. Have you bonded or become best friends with someone because of that relationship? I'd love to hear it, but I think I'm running a little late. And so I'm going to keep going fairly quickly. So, you want to get your colleague to deal with you in a straightforward way when you're having a conflict. And that would depend on the context. So who you are, who they are, the nature of your relationship, and the norms and cultures of your environment. So you might want to test some methods before approaching and confronting them. And so, as I said earlier, if you're someone who is upset that someone's always 5 minutes late, try to set these goals. Do something differently. Take a different tack. Maybe even reach out in a friendly way. Make it a point to smile when they sit down. Catch their eye and smile. That will change you. It will change you. But expecting different results from doing the same thing, rolling your eyes and huffing, that's not going to work. Conflict expert Jennifer Goldman Wetzler says to interrupt the conflict pattern of the past by doing something the other person doesn't expect, which is you to look them in the eye and smile when they're late to the meeting in our hypothetical. So stay curious. The thing about staying curious, and this is really about staying curious about you and the things we've talked about, personalities, cultures, types. Salvador Minuchin, who's an Argentine therapist, says certainty is the enemy of change. That's fairly straightforward, isn't it? We know that. We know that curiosity about other people wards off these biases we've explained, prevents us from stereotyping and thus drawing lesser conclusions of someone, and helps us approach a situation creatively. Ashley Talbot says an individual can focus on their own work ethic and not worry about what their coworker is doing. Great. That's another way to set a low goal. I don't even have to engage them, just not think about them at all. So you want to draw questions from your curiosity and not biases. If you catch yourself unproductively haunting back to those neural pathways you've burned over the weeks, months, and years you've had this feeling, you might want to take back and say, well, how have I persevered with people? How can I get people to not be late? What do I stand from getting people to not be late? And what happens if people aren't late? Well, how does things change? So stay curious and keep asking yourself, if the conflict persists, well, what are some more ways I can address this? How can I look at it? If things go way south, you might use a third-party mediator. These are mostly called for in most agreements now, if you've signed a contract in the last 20 years. Mediators are really looking for the win-win. They're listening to both parties. They're explaining what the other party is saying in case each other really isn't hearing each other. They try and find something common and then build towards that and look for the win-win. And you might choose anyone as a third party, a work colleague whom both of you trust, your manager, someone in a different department with whom you have coffee, whomever it is. Doesn't have to be anything formal, but choose a third party. And if you're having any conflicts at work, this is a question for you, and you can answer it if you like. But if you're having any conflicts at work, what might be the other person's perspective? Here's our 8 steps. We said we'd hit them. Let's go through them quickly. Understand the conflict. We've talked about that. Think about what you want and go through the exercises of setting goals and understanding what the outcomes are. Explore the alternatives. Take the alternatives into consideration before you sit down and already know when you'll walk away and what you won't accept and what you will do if you can't reach an agreement. And then compare what presents itself in reality when you sit down to the notes you made and decide the best solution between those. You want to do this in a private, neutral place. I can't stress this enough. Research shows that this works in private places. It doesn't work in public. We all know that intuitively. You want to be an active listener, which means saying back to them. So what I hear you saying is yada da 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 da, and I should do blank. Did I understand you? Is that what you're saying? And let everyone participate, avoid forming the assumptions, and remain calm. So have you practiced active listening in the past? And if you did it make a difference? Be aware of your body language. So if you're with both feet on the ground, both hands on the table, you look trustworthy. If you're leaned back in the chair, you look unengaged. If you have your arms crossed, you look like you're upset. So be aware of that in the expression on your face. Relax and avoid the always and never trap, because always and never don't exist. Identify your common goal. We've done that. Invite the other party. Here is my common goal. Here is what I would like to see. What would you like to see? When you know their common goal, you can begin to work towards it. Then you can brainstorm solutions, look for win-wins or compromises that will win, discuss each idea, consider whether it can actually be employed. If it can't, discuss why it can't. And if it's between you and someone under you in seniority or title, do their ideas first. Agree on your plan of action and implement it. Those are 8 steps. And we want to use these skills, these 5 skills, when doing those 8 steps: raising the issue early, managing our emotions, showing empathy, practicing active listening, and acknowledging and accepting criticism. So prove that you understand that criticism, acknowledge that you're part of the problem, and try again. And there's our code word: epidemic. And for those of you who have not yet seen nor heard our evaluation link for today. Let me repeat it for you. So if you're not seeing a screen, you're listening by phone or otherwise not engaged and cannot see the screen, please make note of our evaluation link today. It is https://www.surveymonkey.com/lowercase r/ all uppercase letters, V as in victory, M as in Mary, B as in Betty, Y, F as in Frank, 2, F as in Frank. That's our SurveyMonkey link. And the password here on the screen is epidemic. Epidemic is the password. It's a capital E, and there is an epidemic going on of loneliness, which is what we are going to discuss on Monday. So I'm teasing Monday's presentation with today's topic. So loneliness epidemic will be producing on Monday at noon. This is a new topic. You may have seen it in the news lately, and I'm looking forward to doing it. Again, if you're a nurse, we'll be posting your hour within the week. This is 1.0 contact hour and ethics hour. Social workers and nurses, everyone who completes the evaluation will receive a certificate for this course and credit for it. And it is an ethics course. Again, the link is https://www.surveymonkey.com/lowercase r/V as in victory, M as in Mary, B as in Betty, Y, F as in Frank, 2, F as in Frank, and the password today, which you must have to take the survey, is capital E, epidemic. Thank you, Ms. Melton, and thank you all for being with us today. If there are any questions about today's topic or Monday's topic or anything at all, we'll have a little bit of time, about 2 minutes. Be happy to answer those for you. Thank you, Ms. Clardy. Thank you for being here. And thank you, Ms. Hightower. We appreciate that. We appreciate you joining us. We appreciate you referring us when someone comes to you in need, in crisis, with a parent in the hospital, or a loved one who's recently had a stroke, or someone who is 61 years old but just wants to see what's out there. Let us know. We're free. We love to help them. Thank you, Ms. Helms. I'm looking forward to Monday too. And I had it in my mind today. I thought I had more slides than I did. I apologize for rushing y'all. Thank you, Ms. Alexander. I appreciate that. Thank you. You're always so kind, and I appreciate that. Thank everyone for being here. If there are no more questions, then I will look to end today and actually see you then on Monday, we hope. Please see us then, and please have a great weekend. Treat yourself and do whatever it is that you find to be self-care. Thank you all.